You might have seen the Threads article about how to do an outside vent. Well, I thought it would be a good idea to show you as well. So I've got a work in progress here, but this part is done. Now it's a little bit difficult to see, but there is a seam line that comes down here, and out of that is the vent. So obviously the fabric from the seam allowance goes one way, but the fabric from the vent goes another, and that involves a little bit of work, and that's what I'd like to show you. All right, so this is my sleeve. It's actually 2/3 of the sleeve. There's a third piece, and I didn't put that on because I wanted to be able to lie this flat. So you can see the seam lines, and this is the vent, which will, after we do a few things, which will appear eventually on the outside. But obviously we need to do something here, don't we? Okay, so there's the outside, pretty clear, and I'm going to flip it over, show you a few things. So here we are on the other side. Now in this particular treatment, I've got my lining quilted in place, but I will talk to you about how you're going to treat your lining if it differs from this particular treatment. All right, so what you will see is that I've sewn a little silk organza facing here, and this is the really important part. And it's sewn to the right side of the fabric. Of course, it's on the inside of this sample, but it's sewn to the right side, and it's sewn at a right angle coming down from the top, and the angle is right where my stitching has stopped. Right? So obviously when I sewed this, I had to stop and back tack at a certain point so I'd have an opening. And that very point is where I turn the corner and then sew off the other end. So it's very, very critical to have that little facing in place, and that's what's going to allow us to safely put this fabric on the outside. All right, so I'm going to lift this up on a sleeve board. I think it helps to sort of separate the rest of the fabric away from what you're working on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press my other seam, because that will stay in place. So I'm just going to give that a quick press. All right, and it's not a bad idea to put a pin on there just to hold things in place. All right, so this is where you need your really sharp scissors, and I'm going to cut right into that corner, which it's safe for me to do that because I have facing in place. So I'm going to cut right down, and I'm cutting through the fashion fabric and the silk organza facing. So we have very sharp little scissors right to, but not through, right to that point. And then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to turn it around so that I have a square facing. Let me show you that again. It's really the only place it can go. So if you open it out and sort of pull your facing back to form that corner, you have a nicely faced little corner there. And if you give that a press, so now this is absolutely secure, no raw edges at all. And you saw how closely we were able to clip. If you didn't have that facing in there, it would be a bit terrifying, but you do. So this is nice and secure, and shortly that will go to the other side, but we have a little bit more work to do here. So now I'm going to fold this back. This is going to be the outer edge of the vent, and you can see how useful these basting lines are. And if you feel you want to trim this down ever so slightly, you can. Don't get too carried away because you do need that fabric in there. It's part of the strength of your vent. But there we go. So as I said, this shortly will go to the outside, but we have to take care of its lining. So we'll do that now. You can even get rid of a little bit more of that if you like. So here's my piece of lining fabric. Now if you're sewing this, if you have this sort of lining that gets sewn by machine, you would sew it down to the point to which you sewed the sleeve as well. But I think it's a little clearer to see it in this iteration. So what I have to do, if I want the vent, the extension, to be covered with lining and go to the outside, I have to cut this too, don't I? And I'm going to cut it to the same point. I'm not going to bother to face it. I'd never find the right spot. It's not necessary. It's not in a place that's weak. So I'm just going to find that exact corner. It's kind of here. Oh, that's where it is. I'm going to find that corner, and I'm going to clip diagonally down to that point. All right, I'm going to just turn this around so I can get it more easily. So I'm going to cut diagonally down and stop right at that point. Okay? So now I'll be able to fold the top part back, fold the edge in. Let me just stick a pin in here to hold it. And if I give that a press, you can see it's got exactly the same contour as my fashion fabric. So eventually I will sew this on with little fell stitches, and now I can put it to the outside. And in this case, let me trim down my lining a little bit here. My other lining is going to wrap over and be stitched into place, fell stitched in this case. But as I said, if your lining is sewn by machine, it could certainly go to that point. And this will be fell stitched along here as well. All right, so now this is where the clip was, and if you're sewing this by hand, you have to be careful to take a few little stitches in place just to hold that. There's never any strain there. It doesn't get caught on anything, but you want to be sure you've secured that well. So let's look at it from the other side. Take this pin out, and there we are. Very nicely taken care of. And the important thing is this corner is absolutely secure. Nothing can ever happen to it. It can't, nothing can fray, nothing can fall apart because we have that little bit of facing right there. So there you go. Voila.